When it comes to buying a car, safety was once an afterthought, but it now has become a major selling point. Car makers advertise their safety ratings from groups like the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety and Consumer Reports. And automakers are growing ever more focused on technologies that aim to prevent crashes from happening in the first place. General Motors in recent years committed itself to a goal of a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. Automated driver assistance systems, which can include features geared directly toward safety and those meant more for convenience, are expected to comprise a roughly $67 billion market by 2025. The market for automatic emergency braking alone, which stops a car automatically, could be worth as much as $20 billion by 2024. These new technologies have the potential to save countless lives and make driving a lot easier and less stressful. But automation also raises new risks. Features can confuse or distract, or alternatively, drivers may become overly reliant on them. The urge to make vehicles safe goes back to the earliest days of automobiles in America. The first seatbelt patent, for example, was filed by Edward J. Claghorn of New York City in 1885. The first statewide traffic laws were passed in Connecticut in 1901. Drivers in that state were limited to speeds of 12 miles per hour in the city and 15 miles per hour in the country. The three-way stoplight was introduced in 1930. The technology that makes up airbags was developed starting in the early 1950s. Almost as soon as cars began filling roads in early 20th century America, they were getting into crashes. Deaths of motorists and pedestrians skyrocketed from 6,600 in 1915 to 21,900 in 1925. By the 1920s, automakers were changing the designs of their cars to correct flaws that might cause collisions or worsen the effects of them. For example, they started switching over to shatter-resistant windshields. As early as the 1930s, automakers began advertising safety features on their new vehicles. Some car makers began focusing on safety and developed reputations as innovators. Swedish car company Volvo made history in 1959 when engineer Nils Bohlin invented the three-point seatbelt. Volvo essentially gave the design away for free, allowing for its widespread adoption, which persists to this day. Through much of the early to mid-20th century, safety was not one of the top features sought after when purchasing a car.
In the 70s, there was this notion among the auto industry that safety didn't sell, right? That consumers weren't really interested in this car's safer than that car. What they were interested in is this car looks cooler than that car and this car's faster than that car.
That began to change. Activists such as Ralph Nader began drawing public attention to safety issues in cars, particularly with his book Unsafe at Any Speed and his testimony before U.S. Congress. In the late 1960s, the federal government created a raft of new agencies and tasked them with setting safety standards, investigating crashes, and a range of other activities related to driving and transportation. These include the Department of Transportation, the National Transportation Safety Board, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Joan Claybrook was one of the first people to head NHTSA and was, and still is, an advocate of car safety technology.
Then in 1977, when Jimmy Carter got elected, I was asked to head the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So I'd had, a good 10 years of experience by that time, and more than most anybody else in America at my level. And so I did that for 4 years. Very controversial. I issued a lot of standards, including the airbag rule, and started working on side impact protection and made the auto industry recall tens of millions of cars. They hated me for it. They nicknamed me the Dragon Lady.
In 1968, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard made seatbelts required equipment on all cars sold in the U.S. In 1984, New York became the first state to pass a law requiring at least some occupants to wear a seatbelt. States that enacted such seatbelt usage laws usually saw usage rates spike. As late as 1994, seatbelt usage was around 58%. By 2019, that had risen to 91%. These laws have at times aroused opposition. Opponents say they give government too much power over citizens and give police too much power to stop people. Safety advocates point out that despite all the safety innovations that have crept into the car over time, the simple seatbelt still remains one of the most effective ways of staying alive in a crash. Though just 10% of vehicle occupants remain unbelted, the unbelted are responsible for nearly half of all vehicle crash deaths. Safety equipment on a car can be divided into active and passive safety features. Passive safety features are typically things that protect from the effects of a collision: seatbelts, airbags, and crumple zones. Active safety systems are typically things that are meant to prevent a collision in the first place. This often refers to technologies like automatic emergency braking, forward collision warning, and blind spot monitoring. David Zuby conducts vehicle safety research at the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, a group funded by insurance companies that tests cars for their ability to withstand and avoid crashes.
I came up with sort of like 4 qualities of a car that make it safe.
Those are anything that helps a driver avoid a crash, the things that protect a driver or passenger in a crash, the overall usability of the vehicle, and how the vehicle interacts with people or things outside of it.
And so when we talk about harm that a vehicle does to another vehicle, we're talking about something that we refer to as crash compatibility or crash incompatibility. The easiest example to understand is that when a really big vehicle crashes into a really small vehicle, the really small vehicle loses out in that crash. And then there's crashes with vulnerable road users like pedestrians, cyclists, people riding e-scooters, and that kind of a thing.
The first layer of safety considerations any automaker has to worry about come from the US government through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. NHTSA performs several tasks. First, it creates the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. These are the basic standards every vehicle in the US must adhere to. There are federal safety standards for safety equipment, such as airbags and seatbelts, but also for all sorts of parts on a car: windshield glass, brakes, interior lighting, and so on. NHTSA also has the power beyond that, though, to recall any car for anything that presents an unreasonable risk to safety. In addition to creating the federal rules around safety, NHTSA also tests and rates the safety of vehicles through its new car assessment program, and it engages in a range of other activities. Some relate to safety, like promoting seatbelt use, and others do not, such as setting and enforcing fuel economy standards and anti-theft regulation. Its new car assessment program runs vehicles through a battery of tests, including crash tests. A star rating system is used to identify cars that stand out as exceptionally resistant to the effects of crashes. The more stars a vehicle gets, the lower the likelihood of serious injury in a crash. The NCAP program, like so many things related to safety, met with opposition from the industry.
So we had pass or fail beside each make and model of car by year and name of car. And I knew the auto industry would go crazy with this, when they realized what we were doing. And they did.
There was also some political opposition.
When the Reagan administration came in, they did try and kill it, the whole crash testing program.
The NCAP program was the first of its kind in the world and inspired the creation of similar programs in other countries that in some cases go by the NCAP moniker: Euro NCAP for Europe and Japan NCAP, for example. There are also non-governmental groups like IIHS and Consumer Reports, which conduct their own testing or other research on vehicles and equipment and publish safety rankings and recommendations on the ones that perform best.
Our approach to this is we understand what the regulations are doing. What are the gaps in what the regulation is requiring of automakers? And let's see if we can get the automakers to fill some of those gaps by publishing information on which cars are doing a better job of filling those gaps than others.
These picks have no direct influence over whether vehicles can be legally sold or recalled in the US, but they appear to be meaningful enough to some consumers that automakers who receive plaudits from groups like these frequently advertise them. Many non-governmental groups also have advocacy arms that push for stricter safety guidelines, standards for emerging technology, and the adoption of new safety features. Consumer Reports headed an initiative to standardize names for new automated driver assistance features, so consumers are clear about what they are getting when they shop for adaptive cruise control or lane keep assist. Other partners on that consortium are the Automobile Association of America, J.D. Power, and the National Safety Council. Groups such as the Society of Automotive Engineers, now known as SAE, devise technical standards to define and classify new automotive technologies or new concepts. SAE is responsible for the J3016 standard, which outlines 6 levels of vehicle automation and is frequently cited in discussions around self-driving cars and driver assistance tech. On this scale, level 0 refers to cars equipped only with features that warn or momentarily assist the driver, while level 5 automation refers to a vehicle that can drive itself under any condition. Out of all this come the guidelines automakers use to steer product development and what consumers use to steer one of the biggest single purchases they are faced with in life. Driving is a far safer activity than it was several decades ago. The rate of car crash deaths per 100,000 people in 2019 was about half of what it was 4 decades before. Safety advocates, watchdogs, and even some automakers still say there is more that can be done to address safety and further reduce, perhaps even eliminate, crashes and collisions. One example is distracted driving. With readily available devices like smartphones or even large, complex, and dazzling screens embedded in the dashboard, safety advocates say driving while distracted is a growing area of concern. A great deal of attention has gone into active safety features, such as automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, and pedestrian detection. In 2016, NHTSA and IIHS brokered a commitment by 20 automakers to make automatic emergency braking standard equipment on new vehicles by September 2022. By mid-December 2021, at least 12 automakers had met the standard. Pedestrian detection systems engage brakes automatically when they sense a person walking close to the car.
Pedestrian detection, I think, is kind of one of the most important features right now, because not only do we have cars, you want to be protected in a crash, you want to avoid a crash, but also potentially mitigate the effect of a crash on other roadway users too. So it's kind of a big package now of the safety of a vehicle these days.
One group, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, wants at least some of these new technologies to be standard on all cars.
And there's some, newer innovations like the AEB, the automatic emergency braking, which is like so revolutionary. If we got automatic emergency braking, because it helps with distracted drivers, drunk drivers, sleepy drivers, inattentive drivers, and it can be applied to the whole panoply of vehicles. And it stops crashes, and it's like the airbag, but it's for before the crash. It's just revolutionary. It really is.
But new technologies also introduce new questions. Active safety features, such as forward collision warning or blind spot monitoring, are often lumped in with other automated features, such as lane keep assist, which helps keep a car within a lane, or adaptive cruise control, which adjusts the speed of a car to keep a certain distance from the car in front of it. These are not thought of strictly as safety features. The term used to collectively describe a lot of these automated features is ADAS, which can stand for Automated or Advanced Driver Assistance Systems.
They can introduce new safety concerns. They can also potentially increase safety. We just don't have the data to show it, such as the adaptive cruise control. People love it. It also has shown to increase the headway of a vehicle. Having a larger headway is also good for safety, but it also performs at a high enough level that it may make driving more boring. And so, one less thing for the driver to do while driving is just going to likely be replaced by the driver finding something else to do.
Advanced driver assistance systems of varying levels of capability are already available in more than 92% of the vehicles on the road. Right now, a lot of these features are add-ons, which can cost as little as $500 or up to $1,500, though features such as the aforementioned automatic emergency braking are becoming standard equipment. The sheer variety of these systems, how they are named, how features are bundled, even how they perform on different vehicles can all be sources of confusion for consumers.
Say you even have something as simple as a compact sedan versus a full-size SUV. If it has literally the exact same hardware, even the size of the vehicle changes the height of the camera looking forward at the road and things like that. So not only are there lots of different systems on all of the different brands, but even within the same manufacturer, the performance can definitely vary.
Consumer Reports tests a brand's systems across a range of vehicles to control for some of this. Unmet consumer expectations can defeat the purpose of stocking such features on a car in the first place.
We find sometimes that when consumers purchase a vehicle with these systems, that they end up shutting them off because they either end up being annoying or they don't match their expectations for what they thought they were getting.
Safety researchers and regulators are trying to determine whether new safety features lull drivers or passengers into a false sense of security, whether consumers have inaccurate ideas about what automated driving systems can and cannot do, and whether consumers mistakenly believe their cars can drive themselves when they really cannot.
Things like Tesla's autopilot that raise a lot of concern about, do drivers really understand how to use these systems safely? Or will they be lulled into some state of complacency that the system is better than it really is? But Tesla's not the only one creating that kind of a system. Apparently the market is asking for some kind of assistance with driving, but how do we want to guide the industry to provide that in a way that is safe, that doesn't lead to drivers over-relying?
There have also been some reports of more aggressive driving on America's roads during the COVID-19 pandemic, though insiders say more research is needed on how extensive that is and what its causes and effects are.
The leading contender is that basically driver behavior is kind of eroding, that maybe the lack of traffic and congestion during the pandemic led people to believe they could get away with driving a little bit more crazily.
Driving is probably safer than it has ever been, but it still requires skill and caution.